And good local time to everybody. This is the Kubernetes community meeting for December 15th. And we are going to start out with a demo from one of our special interest groups, which is escaping me right now. Too many windows. Frederick, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? My apologies.
Okay, hi, I'm Frederick. I'm an engineer at Chorus, and as part of SIG instrumentation, we set ourselves a goal to have sort of a one-button push end-to-end monitoring for Kubernetes, and that's what I'm going to present to you today. I have a self-hosted Kubernetes cluster here, 2 nodes. And I have already set up a namespace for our monitoring things. And let's just have a quick look at that. And we can see that there's nothing running so far. Can everybody see my screen?
We can, thank you.
Okay. So we have nothing running so far. So now we take our one-button push solution and we create everything, and then we can have another look at how it's starting up all our components. So what we have here is we're using Prometheus to collect the metrics from Kubernetes, and we have a couple of prepared Grafana dashboards and alerting rules, as well as the Prometheus alert manager to eventually send out notifications. So after a few seconds, we can see that everything is spun up, and we can have a look at Prometheus. So what we can see here is that the configuration that we have in place automatically discovers all the components within Kubernetes. So it finds the etcd cluster, kube controller manager, kube DNS, and all the components, and is starting to scrape those. As it's collecting all of this data, it continuously evaluates all the alerts that we have in place. So here we have a pretty exhaustive list of alerts already in place, but that's of course always improvable. So we invite everyone to contribute to that, but we already have a pretty good list here. And this Prometheus instance also automatically discovers alert manager instances with it running within our Kubernetes cluster. So that means that when alerts actually fire, that notifications will be sent out accordingly. And in addition to that, I spoke about some pre-built dashboards. So we have a couple of dashboards, for example, one for the entire Kubernetes cluster. So we can have a general overview of what's going on in our cluster. And we can also dig into multiple dimensions. So in this case, we're looking at the entire cluster. We can also look at individual nodes. So here we have a master, for example, which does not have much memory left anymore. I have a larger size worker, which does have a bit more memory left. And in addition to that, we can also look at individual deployments, for example. Let's look at Grafana deployment, for example. So by default, we can already, without even having instrumented our applications themselves, we can already have a pretty good overview of everything that is running within Kubernetes. And in case we're not covering everything with the deployment yet, we can dig into yeah, that basically sums up the demo itself. Are there any questions?
No questions from anyone. This is work that SIG instrumentation is doing, which is super cool. Really, no questions. Sorry, I've muted you all. How about that? Okay, well, thanks, Frederick, for the work and the demo. And we did get one question in chat, which is, where is the code for this demo available? Can you?
Yes. So this is all under CoreOS Prometheus. So essentially, this is just a collection of manifests. As you saw, I just executed a script which really just does a bunch of kubectl applies, and that's most of the magic. And under the hood, this uses some of the things that we're working on at CoreOS. For example, the Prometheus operator, which automatically manages Prometheus installations for you, as well as the alert manager clusters.
Very cool. All right, any other questions from people? All right, well, thanks for the SIG instrumentation update, and this looks like it's going to be a lot of fun and good help for monitoring going forward. All right, so we are on to releases. I don't think there's a 1.4 release. I haven't heard about, or I don't 1.4 update. Do you know of one, Saad?
No, I think 1.47 was the last one.
Okay, excellent. Then let's jump right on to 1.5.
So yeah, 1.5.0 went out on Monday. There was a security issue identified with that release. We spun up a 1.51 that went out less than 24 hours later. We're recommending that everybody use 1.51 instead of 1.50, unless you're careful with basically the flags that you pass in for authorization and authentication. The blog post for 1.5 is live, the docs are live, and 1.5.2 we're going to hold off until after the holidays unless there's a pressing need P0 issue. I was talking to Sarah earlier, it looks like we may have something, but
yeah, don't quote me on it. It was an overheard conversation.
We'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's all the excitement there is, which is nice after the 1.5 lead.
Yes.
So as always, many, many thanks to our 1.5 release team with Saad and Caleb Miles from CoreOS and Dims from Mirantis as well. So thank you all for all the work you put in getting us to a 1.5 release and then a 1.151 right on its heels, which is exciting but important. Garrett, are you going to talk about 1.6 release timeline? I saw a PR go out about that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Can you pull that up, actually? It's linked in the doc, I believe.
Can I show it? Maybe. Share screen. Chrome, whiteboard, no. Watch me share the wrong thing. Possibly. See if that will work now. It says Chrome, but which thing in Chrome is it? Features release, that one. Yes. Hey, success.
Is it going to pop up there? Or?
In theory, it will also pop up there.
Okay.
Does everyone see my screen, which is the proposed timeline for 1.6?
I'm looking at it as well on mine, so it's, I can talk to it, but I just want to make sure everyone else sees it.
Yep.
Yeah, you can see it. Okay, so we actually are also projecting this through a Hangout in the room, and sometimes that doesn't render properly. So
got it. So I made a PR with a proposed timeline for 1.6. It follows the same schedule and the same kind of format as previous releases. It'll take about a quarter for 1.6, and we're going to be using the time at the end of December for planning and potential bug fix. We expect it to be quiet. We expect people to take vacations and I just enjoy the break. So we'd start the coding phase January 3rd, which is the first week of January and the first day after the holiday. Have a 7-week code period. In that time, just like during this release, we'd have a feature freeze date. So you have till the 3rd week of January, January 24th, to propose any features that you would like to be in the features repo. sorry, any features that you'd like to be in 1.6, they need to be in the features repo. I think we had a few issues, or maybe one issue with that this time. Any features for 1.6 should be in that repo. It makes it really easy to have it in a centralized place. Feb 27 would be our code freeze date, and that's when we move into the code slush period where we work on bug fix. And some SIGs will probably be focusing on bug fix the entire way, but just as a general rule of thumb, no more features are going to be going in at that point. And then the release would be scheduled for March 22nd. On the PR itself, it looked like a lot of people were okay with that timeline. There was one suggestion from Eric Toon that had some pretty good support behind it, which was doing a release candidate release about a week prior to the actual official 1.6 release, and that would give some early customers and early adopters a chance to kick the tires on a nearly final version of 1.6 and give us a chance to potentially identify issues a little bit earlier than the 1.6 release. So take a look at the proposal, comment. I think Ihor has approved. He's one of the 3 approvers as well for it. If we get more feedback, we can incorporate it into the schedule, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this so that I can go back to this screen, which will tell me what the chat window has been saying. Oh, more about mutes and videos. Okay, so is there any discussion about the 1.6 timeline? We're all good with it?
I think given the holiday season, we probably want to get this finalized soon. Should we set an artificial deadline? There's not a community meeting next week, is there?
There is the 1.5 retrospective next week.
And when is that? Is that on Thursday?
It's on Thursday. It'll be in the same time as this. So we could set a deadline of discussion and putting this in place by then.
That sounds good. So any discussion should happen before next Thursday, and we will aim to finalize the 1.6 schedule then.
Awesome. All right. Any other comments on that one? No? All right. So that is 1.6 timeline. Ihor, you had some 1.6 feature discussion to talk about, or 1.6 feature notices.
Yeah, just a brief notice, just 2 cents from me. So this is the request for the feature owners or the people who are going to be the feature owners for 1.6. So there are some features, there are lots of features that are currently in alpha or beta state for 1.5. And if you're willing to continue development of this feature in 1.6, please update the labels and update the milestones there, or just ping me directly and confirm that these features are going to be developed in 1.6. I will update the milestone and the labels. So at the current moment between the releases, I'm performing some maintenance work in the features repo. I'm cleaning up some old labels, I'm adding some new labels, so I'd like to make our feature submission process more clear and perfect. Yeah, that's all from me.
Awesome, thanks, Ihor.
Ihor, are you going to work on simplifying the features repo template?
Yes, that is one of the most important priorities for us.
Okay.
We have already started some discussion in one of the mailing lists, and I'm going to follow up with that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Anything more about features or any questions for Ihor? Off we go. We will go on to SIG-Scheduling. So these are the continued discussions of the 1.6 self-assessment for the SIGs. I'll put the helpful questions in again into the notes, but basically this is is 1.6 going to be stabilization for your SIG? What have you done your introspection, and what are your thoughts around the work that is being done by your SIG? So David Oppenheimer or Tim St. Clair of Red Hat, to disambiguate the Tim St. Clair of Google and Red Hat. We have 2, which is weird. Anyway, David or Tim, are you on?
Yeah, we are here. Can you hear me, Sarah?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, this is David. Yeah, so Tim and I and the folks on the scheduling SIG discussed this at the last couple of SIG meetings. So here's the 3-minute summary. So first, in terms of the metrics of the current health, Connor Doyle from Intel ran a code coverage test for the unit tests we have in the code parts of the repository that we're responsible for, and found we had we didn't actually compute the exact average, but it looked like it was about 60 to 70% coverage. Our goal is 80%. So one of the things we're going to work on for 1.6 is improving the test coverage. He used the whatever tool gets invoked when you do make with the cube cover, cube underscore cover parameter. Anyway, so apparently there's a tool, and if people are wondering about that, get in touch with Connor, because it seemed pretty straightforward to get the test coverage automatically computed for the unit tests for different directories. Does our SIG own code? Yes, in a bunch of different repositories. A bunch of different directories in the Kubernetes repository and also in the Kubernetes incubator. We talked about how much time we spend responding to user questions. There's not a lot of traffic on the SIG mailing list. We don't pay attention to Stack Overflow, but we do get a lot of issues in GitHub, but generally only respond to the ones tagged with the @SIG-Scheduling. People still people will file issues with scheduling and resource management questions or problems or suggestions and not tag them with the SIG, and those we essentially never see. So we talked about how we might improve that, although that's a tricky problem that I know all the SIGs have. There were about 100 open issues, which was less than we kind of expected, and actually one of the things we've already started doing that we're going to continue in 1.6 is closing some of the older issues. Tim St. Clair started working on this, closing the old and irrelevant issues or things that aren't actionable to try to get that down lower, and we're using the new labels that Brian Grant set up. And we have about a dozen test flakes that we're responsible for, and historically we have about 75-25% feature stabilization ratio that's trending more towards 50-50. So more towards stabilization, less new features. In the past we've had a lot of new features. And then lastly, in terms of what we're doing for 1.6, most of the work's not new feature development. The one thing that is kind of a new feature in core is to finish this forgiveness feature that's part of tolerations. But other than that, everything else is either moving things to beta. For example, the node affinity, pod affinity, and taints and tolerations were all going to be moved to beta, or working on design, like we're planning to work on design for preemption and resource allocation for batch workloads, not implement anything, but just work on the design for that. And then everything else is just technical debt, like updating the owner's files, improving documentation. We have some concrete ideas about areas where the documentation for scheduling, resource management related stuff should be improved. Auditing the scheduler events so that the events you get when you do kube control get events is informative and coherent. Improving the logging so that we're logging stuff at the right level, we're logging the right stuff, we're not logging too much stuff and generating log spam. So improving logging in addition to the events, and closing those inactive and duplicate and unactionable issues, like I mentioned before. And then the last thing is, I think somebody mentioned this at the last SIG meeting, but together with the node team, we're forming a temporary working group for resource management to try to prioritize 2017 features related to resource management that span kind of node and cluster level scheduling. So things like how you handle NUMA scheduling and how other features for like performance sensitive applications and scheduling disk as a resource and things like that. So we're going to work on prioritizing and understanding those features during 1.6, but again, that's not something that'll be implemented. So that is the quick summary from SIG scheduling.
Which is awesome. Thank you for the update, and thank you to Tim and the rest of the team for going through the 100 open issues and relabeling them. I know they were relabeled and then relabeled after the labeling changes, so that was extra awesome that it was done and then tidied up in the new paradigm. Because as you all know, this project is nothing if it is not moving fast and trying to improve things all the time. So thanks for keeping up with us and moving.
Tim, sorry, I should just say, Tim, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No.
I kind of read off of a list of talking points that Tim and I had put together before the meeting. So
nice. Is that the?
I didn't expect that, but I just wanted to make sure Tim didn't have anything else that I might have missed or say.
Is that the doc you linked in the notes?
It is the doc.
Can one of you open that up to Kubernetes-dev, because it doesn't seem to have open enough permissions?
Sure.
Thanks.
I have a question, David. Is there a proposal open for the preemption?
There is an issue where we are having discussion about something that's vaguely related to preemption, or that uses preemption as a mechanism, which is kind of like resource arbitration between different batch frameworks. It's not an issue about preemption per se, kind of like in the Borg preemption sense, although that is kind of a piece of it, and we need to consider both of these issues together. If you are burning to make some comments about preemption in general, I can open an issue for preemption. We will need to do that at some point. We do have, actually, now that I think about it, some issue related to priorities.
Yeah, I'm sure I can find that.
Yeah. I don't know to what extent it talks about preemption specifically, but
okay. And the reason I'm asking is right now there's an active discussion about needing preemption on kubelets to ensure that pods created from static manifests.
Yes, actually, Dawn has mentioned that to me several times, actually, that there is an issue open for that specifically. The node level, like ordering the evictions and keeping like important pods bound to the node, and having some mechanism for that might be related to scheduler level preemptions.
So you may know the answer to this. So there's some notion of criticality that was added for DNS.
Right.
For pods that go through the scheduler. Do you know if that mechanism also works for daemon sets?
No, it doesn't, because the...
Okay, fine. I'll follow up.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It doesn't, and actually that question is discussed on that issue. I'll send you a pointer to the issue, because some...
Thanks.
All right. There was a note that says Don wants it for hosted things like kube proxy in chat.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Next up that was SIG scheduling, and we are on to SIG-Autoscaling. Solly Ross from Red Hat.
All right. So we basically have kind of two areas in the code base. There's the horizontal pod autoscaler, which lives in Kubernetes, and the cluster autoscaler, which I believe lives in contrib. The horizontal pod autoscaler generally has pretty good unit test coverage, somewhere between 75 and 85, depending on where you look, which directory. So that's pretty good. We realized that none of us were actually looking at Stack Overflow, so that's something that we need to work on. In general, in terms of stabilization for the cluster autoscaler for this release, one of our big goals in general for this release is to get more insight into the status of both of the autoscalers and allow users to figure out what's going wrong. So in that regard, there's a focus on stabilization. For the horizontal pod autoscaler, we are bumping the to a new API version. So obviously that's a new feature, but the purpose of that is to stabilize some of the custom metrics work. So it's kind of a mix of stabilization through new features, as kind of oxymoronic as that sounds. And we have realized that in the past we've kind of been really slow to actually have any work on new features. So we need to, one of our focuses for the next few releases is to make sure that we can kind of keep up momentum, and if we do have new features, be able to actually work on them. In terms of our open bug reports, it's a bit high, but again, a lot of the bugs we're seeing is just people that are confused or have a lack of insight into what's going on with their HPA. So we're hoping that our work on providing more insight into this is going to help. In terms of flakes, the HPA has a couple of flakes in the ETE test suite, and there's a bunch of cluster autoscaler flakes. But we're hoping some of the insight work will help with those too. So kind of all ties back to that. How do we get visibility into the status of the auto scaling? And like was mentioned previously, I discovered as I was looking through our issues, we also have some unlabeled issues. But factoring for unlabeled issues, we have in the order of magnitude of about 100 open issues. Kind of flipping between questions and feature requests for the HPA logic to be more complex when dealing with certain failure cases. So we'll be looking towards solving some of those in the future, and others are just getting better at answering those questions or being like, no, we're not going to choose to do that right now.
Excellent. We had a question in the chat about our custom metrics in 1.5 or 1.6 as a feature.
Okay. So custom metrics. So there's kind of two parts of custom metrics. There is the actual HPA API object, which will definitely be in 1.6. And then there's the backing API that allows the HPA to retrieve custom metrics, and that we're targeting for 1.6 as well. And hopefully we'll have some initial implementations on top of some of the monitoring backends, but I suspect that more implementations will trickle in over 1.6, 1.7, and we'll look to stabilize that more because it's going to be alpha in 1.6, but not in 1.5. 1.5 had custom metrics in this very, very, very alpha state that was not particularly usable by customers, and so we kind of decided to scrap that and move with a better design that's actually better integrated into the HPA API object.
Excellent. Did that answer your question, Josh? Enough anyway. I will
Feel free to ping me on Slack if you want to have any more specific questions or whatever, or
okay.
Either works.
Josh, meet Sully. Cool. All right. Any other questions about SIG-Autoscaling? All right. Let's move on to SIG-ClusterOps, and we're going through things a little bit quickly today, and we lost one of our agenda items about docs in 1.6. So we will have extra space if there are any other SIGs that want to go through their introspection questions. So Rob, ClusterOps, what's going on there?
Is my mic? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Awesome. Wow, I love the networks. So ClusterOps has been moving slow. Mike and I have been busy doing a lot of different things, and there's a lot of activity around ClusterOps. I didn't see did Lifecycle come in with a report?
Lifecycle did, yes, last week.
Last week, okay. Cool. So one of the things that I guess I'd start with, we would love to see additional leadership. So somebody else who can help host meetings, because Mike and I haven't been regular enough and it's been hurting the progress in the SIG. So if somebody's interested in doing that, we would be happy to do that. There's been some fluttering around with some related SIGs with some overlap, and we would entertain people who have operational concerns, standalone or otherwise, to participate with us, because there's time in our agendas. We're still trying to meet every week, and we have a ton of backlog of work around producing documentation. I'd love to see a new flood of demos and discussions around infrastructure, reference architectures, and things like that. So we're seeing all this activity. ClusterOps' goal is to be a center point for it, so that we can actually discuss it, document it, figure out best practices around operating. And just from a history perspective, ClusterOps really works around taking the release that's out and the releases that are out and figuring out how to build operational practices, reference architectures, documentation, commonalities between different operating environments and practices, and do that. And then our goal is having those conversations to be a place where people can come together to talk about operating and improving Kubernetes. So if people need to say, hey, we're trying to figure out if this is the right thing or not, we would be very happy to have people have an audience at ClusterOps. So that's why we have weekly meetings. We meet every Thursday, I guess at 1 o'clock Pacific. I'm in Central, so 3 o'clock for me. I'm hoping to do we've produced some really interesting maps of functionality for Kubernetes. We're about to do some networking work, and we've written a document about Kubernetes upgrades the manual way. And all of those things we're refining in meetings and having discussions about. So a lot of good stuff happening. It's just we could use somebody else to help carry the ball from chairing the meetings.
So it looks like you have a volunteer in chat from Jason Singer DeMar.
Oh, good.
So you two should chat offline about that. And thank you for the
Jason, that's awesome.
the framing of what SIG-ClusterOps is doing as well. That's awesome. Did you guys go through?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, did you go through the questions? I know a lot of them are kind of tangential to you because you don't own much code.
Right. No, we haven't. So we haven't really had a good meeting in a couple of weeks because of KubeCon, reInvent, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we are definitely behind. For us, the hardening release is a chance to catch up and actually produce the documentation and collect documentation from that perspective. So.
Rob,
yeah.
Where are you collecting that documentation?
So we have a document for reference architecture that is linked off of. I'll put the documents that we track in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Are they Google documents or?
Yes.
Okay.
We can look at moving them from Google Docs out to Markdown in the community repo or out onto Kubernetes IO at some point.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, our goal was to use the Google Docs while we were doing collaborative editing. And then, so I just pasted the one, and then that has links. We'd love to get this into something that was more source controlled.
Yeah.
Especially, and the question I would have about that is graphics. So we're producing, so the model that we sort of settled on was that we would produce graphics for the documentation first, because it made it easier to actually then document stuff. So the documents are going in Google, they're in Google Drawings, and then those just need to get written around and marked down. If people are willing and have time, I would be very happy to coordinate and host a hack on these docs next week. So
like something
it's always a fun holiday activity to write documentation.
Sounds like something you and Jason can chat about and then announce when you have a time.
We'll do it. And I know that some people have been using the drawings. Please, they are CC drawings. We're building these as community resources. So feel free to pull them in, make suggestions for it. Our goal is, trying to demystify Kubernetes and the drawings. Drawings is the first step.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And thank you for stepping up and saying you'll help.
Hey, Jason.
Go team. Okay, other SIGs. I didn't see anybody drop into the notes that they wanted to go through the introspection questions. So last call on SIGs. All right. I'm not hearing anything, so I'll go on to open discussion topics. Does anybody have anything they want to discuss? What is the current status of Kubernetes Anywhere? Hey, how about that as a topic? I don't know the answer to it. Do we know, is there anyone on the call who has an answer to what is the current status of Kubernetes Anywhere? Brian's going to jump in.
I do not know the status, but I suggest asking on the cluster lifecycle, SIG cluster lifecycle Slack.
Yeah, I want to second that. I can tell, you know, our eventual goal here is to extract a lot of the commonalities across things like Kubernetes Anywhere, KOps, and all the other things into kubeadmin, and then break that out so that something that's more sort of full cycle like Kubernetes Anywhere can use it. I'm not sure exactly what the status is there. I know there is a mode for Kubernetes Anywhere to actually use kubeadmin, but I haven't been tracking that closely. Mike would probably be the right guy to talk to, and the Slack channel or the mailing list would be a great place. Or you can join our meetings, which are Tuesday at 9 a.m.
And that's Mike Denise that you were referring to.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion topics for today? Thought we might end up with a light agenda once I lost that agenda item. Oh, Brian's got something.
I have something.
No,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I just want to give the SIG leads a heads up that we're,
Ooh, yes.
Igor and I are working on setting up some finer grained notification mechanisms, but we will need help from the SIG leads to fully implement them. And the reasons why will become clear when we send out a note to the SIG leads mailing list. But be watching for that, and please follow the instructions when they come your way.
So there is, in our grand effort to distribute control within this project and distribute decision-making and all of that, and engagement, there's going to be another request out to the SIG leads, because I know many of you are on here, about hosting this meeting going forward. So at this point, we have 25 SIGs, give or take, that ebbs and flows on a seemingly daily basis at this point. But that means that each SIG would be asked to host this meeting twice next year. So I will be sending out a mail about that, and I will certainly be helping in the background getting the agenda together and such, but ultimately the hosting of it and the ownership will be with the SIG leads, trying to keep this moving forward as a way to keep you all engaged and getting the right topics and the right discussions happening. Big thumbs up from Joe. Anybody else have thoughts? Hosting the meeting is fun. Oh, Joe, you're so sweet. It really is, actually. I have a grand time doing it. It's just half a day for me with all the other associated bits. So we want to cut my chunk of it down and have you guys share some of that as well.
And I think as part of that, I think we decided that all the SIG meetings should be recorded. And so everybody should have those muscles figured out in terms of what it takes to record meetings and post those. So
that is true. And there's
technical hurdles. And so we'll get that figured out for everybody.
Yep, and there's work going on even as we speak, because I guess just got a chat about it, to get every SIG having a playlist inside the Kubernetes YouTube channel. So even if you're self-hosting, you can send a link to us and we can add it to the playlist. So we will be centralizing where all of the SIG videos are going. So you can still self-host, because if that's easy enough for you, that's great. Otherwise, we will be able to host them for you and upload them and put them into the Kubernetes playlists, whether they are external playlists or internal playlists. So progress, always working to try and make this better. As I said, it's a really fast-moving project, so thank you all for continuing to offer suggestions, offer improvements, and work against those improvements, which is even more helpful, and for keeping up with us as we change things on the fly. This is a bus we are trying to fly, so let's make it go. We're putting the wings on as we go, to mix my metaphors. Anyway, any other topics? Quick, a general question. Just started using Helm. What is the consensus in Kubernetes? quick take on the audience. Is it good? Is it bad? Don't bother. Helm is great. Helm is one of our standard projects. And do we have anybody from SIG-Apps on here today? Okay, doesn't sound like it. So, so the special interest group that works on Helm is SIG-Apps, and they have weekly meetings as well. And Jason says it's the best thing since sliced bread. On the whole, we do think that we are supporting the project, and it is beyond incubated. It is now in our repo, and we want to go ahead and keep getting feedback on it, suggestions from it, and where there is lacking documentation, let us know or help us make it better. That answer your question enough, Fernand? More info in SIG-Apps is really what I answered. Okay, good. All right, anyone else with questions? Otherwise, we get a couple of notices.
Yes, Sarah, so I have a brief, also one note. So I also had to send a message to SIG leads and associate Kubernetes Dev and Kubernetes regarding their roadmap for 2017. As most of you may remember, we have discussed this roadmap during the Developer Summit in Austin and the previous Kubernetes community meeting here. So I'd like to request the SIGs to start working on their roadmap and share that. So as far as I know, SIG-Apps has already started on that, and I've linked the sample there. So this is a request to another SIGs. Please continue working on it.
And information on roadmap should come back to you and Aparna?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, thank you. All right, well, little notices. Next week's community meeting is actually going to be the 1.5 retrospective and the confirmation of the 1.6 dates.
Correct.
And the community meeting on the 29th is canceled because you should all be resting and relaxing and spending time with friends and family instead of us, unless you count us as friends and family, in which case we could put on hats and do something. But I think you should probably go spend time and chill with people that are closer. All right. Anything else? All right. We will see you next week at the retrospective, and then for those of you who don't join for that, have a great holiday season, end of year, and we'll see you in the new year.